Hello MMA fans, it's Joe, the MMA Originalist. I'm back after a 2-year hiatus, and actually my last return was a 5-year hiatus. So I'm back, motivated. My career is still busy, but I've committed to doing what I love doing, and that's making prospect videos. A little bit of history on myself. This channel, I made prospect videos as far back as 2007. Some of the most notable fighters I talked about, and this is all guys before they made it to the bigger promotions: Alexander Gustafsson, Rory McDonald, Stipe Miocic, Henry Cejudo, to name a few. We've had well over 200 guys make it to the bigger shows, and all these guys had no big show experience. Many of them were highly unknown. So it was super fun to see these guys progress, and you can look back at some of the old videos and see that although the quality wasn't great as far as the video itself was, the fighter, the depth of the videos are there. This year I'm committed to put together a 2020 9-part video series with featuring men's prospects from all 8 major divisions, and also we'll put together a 9th video that will be the female prospects of MMA today. Back in the day, the rules for my videos were no UFC experience, no Pride experience, no Strikeforce, no Ultimate Fighter. And of course, nowadays, the industry, as far as organizations go, has changed considerably. So the rules for this video set will be no UFC experience, no Contender Series experience, no Ultimate Fighter experience. Although it's easy to miss a guy because, you know, there's so many... has been so many Ultimate Fighter tryouts and shows, you know, throughout. But also no Bellator experience, and you won't see any big names from promotions like Rizin, ONE FC, you know, even KSW. No M1 Global Champions, although there is a guy I'd like to talk about, but we'll surpass on those guys because they do have the guaranteed UFC contract. You may see the odd guy that's a good name that's not notable to the world as far as the big stage goes in some of those organizations, but typically we try to stay away from them. And also we try to get most fighters under the age of 30. You might see the odd guy here and there in some of the videos that are over 30, but typically we would like to get guys from anywhere from 18 up to 28, 29 at the most. Again, the videos don't necessarily pick, they're not ranked like top 20 or whatever you might say. It's just prospects that we pick out as guys with possibly a future and you know, exciting young prospects coming up. We try to go for a lot of obscure folks that you never heard of before. You may know some people. A hardcore fan may know a majority of these, although I guarantee you there'll be some folks you never heard of. And it's quite interesting for us. Looking at a couple of fun facts for today's video, which is going to feature the lightweights, by the way. And we're hoping to get the next video out in the next 3 weeks when we hit our next division. But for this video, it's 20 fighters we're featuring. Their combined record is 197 wins and 9 losses. And also we have fighters from 13 different countries, which is super cool. Just looking at the industry nowadays, compared to what it was like in the past, there is just countless prospects. It's incredible. And to see how much these guys are putting into their careers and how serious they are at a young age and making, you know, not making much money, it really tells you how strong this sport is today and how strong it's going to be in the future. There are so many guys, they're putting their careers on hold as far as, you know, university and those kind of things to pursue this MMA career. So, having said all that, if you're a hardcore fan or even a casual fan, I really think this video is something you could enjoy. So sit back. This is going to be a long one. Like I said, we're going to talk about 20 fighters. Sit back, enjoy it. And again, I appreciate any views we get, comments, the like button, subscriptions, because not only does it help the video and tell us you want me to make more, but it also helps these fighters. The more exposure we can get for them, the greater. So feel free to to comment, like, that kind of stuff. And another note is, every fighter I talk about, I will put links in the section below, links to video highlights of these guys and their fights. So please check that out as well. So nonetheless, excuse me, let's get started here. The first fighter we're going to talk about is a Russian fighter named Yusuf Razaev. 5'8", 155 pounds. Sherdog has him at 145, but he recently moved up from 145 to 155. He's 16-1, 24 years old, 2 TKO victories, 8 submission victories. He did avenge his only loss, and that was to a very talented older fighter. Fight Club Berkut. It's an association with many talented fighters. I believe he was born in the Czech Republic, but he is based out of Russia. He has some very key victories in his early career. He's beaten previously 12-0 Raimundo Batista, 26-9 Hueo Nogueira. He's got a nice victory over UFC vet Andre Winner. And again, like I talked about, he avenges only lost to 11-2 Marat Balayev. He's also got a nice victory over the World Series of Fighting and Bellator veteran Luis Palomino. A lot of you guys remember him. He was a brawler out of those two organizations. He had a couple of wars that come to mind. One for sure is the war against Justin Gaethje back in the day. But the list goes on. Check out the section below for some good highlight videos. He fights in my opinion, one of the most underrated organizations in the world, and that's the ACA to Russia. It used to be called ACB. That show puts on tremendous fights. And he's in the lightweight division, and I can tell you right now, their lightweight division is full of killers. So it'd be nice to see him get picked up soon, because the longer you stay in that, doesn't matter who you are, if you're in that organization, eventually you're going to lose. There is a whack of guys in that lightweight division in ACA that could step into the UFC today. Not just himself, a number of guys. Having said that, he still is getting better. Pretty well-rounded fighter. I guess you could say his striking is decent. It's improving. But he's a tough, greedy guy, and he is kind of well-known in Russia. I've seen his Instagram. He's got about 350,000 followers, so that gives you an idea, and it's growing. We talked about his striking and, decent power, solid takedowns and grappling, good submission ability, and also shows the ability to go 5 rounds. So the stamina isn't bad. But I still see some room for improvement there. Very athletic, very hardworking, and this guy is fully committed. I think the time is now. Maybe another victory or so, and it'd be cool to see him get picked up by the UFC. I mean, Bellator too, but I think I'd prefer to see him to get in that Shark Tank and fight in the UFC lightweight division. He's not. Some of the other guys we're going to talk about are still raw and fresh. But he's at the point in his career now, he's almost 20 fights in. He's had some some tough wins over some tough opponents. So I'd like to see him get in there with another win or two. The next fighter we're going to talk about. So let's change our view here and let's go over to Mexico. We all know Mexico, when it comes to boxing, historically, has some of the all-time greats. Antonio Barrera was a guy that stands out. I think Julio Cesar Chavez is Mexican. So they had some of the toughest boxers, the most exciting fighters to watch historically back in the day. Now, if you're not familiar with Combat America, they put on some terrific fights. They have a decent stable of fighters and a lot of high Mexican content. And the first guy we're going to talk about is Daniel Zellhuber, 20 years old. I may pronounce that wrong, sorry, Zellhuber. 20 years old, 6'1", 155. He's a huge lightweight. Nicknamed the Golden Boy. Again, massive lightweight. I see this guy probably moving up to welterweight when he gets a little older, but he's so young. Mexican fighter, fights at a Team Romero. 8 wins, no losses. You'll see he's 8-0 on Tapology. Sherdog has him at 6-0, but he's 8-0 with 8 TKOs. Hasn't fought, big names yet, but he did beat previously undefeated 4-0 Gian Cortez. And I believe he started fighting pro at 16 or 17. He's another very tough, young, aggressive fighter. You look at some of the highlights I'll put in the section below. Check them out. All his victories, they're wars. Like he's not fighting bums, and even if you don't know his opponents, they're gritty victories. And again, I talked about how his size, he uses that length really good. He has good leg kicks, and he's very, very, very long for 155. But he's so young, I just see this guy moving up eventually. And he finishes fights, shows really good takedown defense, displays good ground and pound. And again, you'll see a couple of wars in the section below. Having said that, he's a can't-miss prospect. I mean, 20 years old, 8-0 with his size. He's the guy that you would like to see not jump into a big organization right now. Maybe 3 or 4 victories that would put him at maybe 21, 22, and a little bit more well-rounded. And but definitely a guy, like I said, the Mexican market can be huge for these bigger promotions. And I'd like to see him get to the UFC or even Bellator. He'd be a good fit in that organization as well. But it'd be cool to see this young guy, get a chance to make some good money. And I'm sure the Combat America organization has a tight grip on him. But hopefully he gets a shot. The next guy we're going to talk about. The last name's going to say it all, folks. Usman Nurmagomedov. Fighting out of Russia, Dagestan. 21 years old. I have him listed at 6 feet. Not sure how accurate that is. 155. Eagles MMA, of course, with the great Khabib Nurmagomedov, a cousin of his. 8-0, 4 TKOs, 3 submissions. So he finishes fights. And the thing is, Khabib has got another cousin who we're going to talk about in another weight class division, Omar Magomedov, and he's building up hype big time. Usman's somewhat been under the radar. If you look at the way he fights, again, we can look at some of his key wins first. He's beaten some decent guys with half-decent records. No big names, but, he's got a nice first round KO win over Roman Govanov, and you'll see that in the section below. But obviously, when you think of the Nurmagomedovs and the Russians, you think of wrestling. And he does have wrestling. But primarily, from most of the video footage we see, he's standing up. And but when he does get into that control ground game, he looks pretty decent to me. And again, he's just a young guy, just a kid. And with the training partners he has, my goodness, he has a chance to get a lot better. And he shows some good power for not a bulky-looking guy, but high-level grappling. And again, when you're surrounded by those kind of guys, those kind of fighters, the level of experience and knowledge you're going to pick up is tremendous compared to some of the other folks competing against you. So 8-0 at that age, again, 2 or 3 or maybe 4 wins, seem to mature a little bit in all aspects of the game, and it's inevitable. If this guy makes it to 11, 12-0, it's going to be there for him. Just on name alone, the option to be picked up. But to give the guy the credit, he can fight. And I'm looking forward to seeing him fight out until he gets to the big shows. Another exciting prospect. Next on the list. This is a guy, I've attached videos for him. And then all the guys we're going to talk about today, his videos may be the funnest and most exciting to watch. Ludovit Klein, fighting in Slovakia, 24 years of age. I have him at 5'9", 155. 15 wins, 2 losses, 6 knockouts, 8 submissions. Got some nice victories, key wins. He's knocked out 39-20. Cuello Rodriguez, he's got a victory over 13-2. Wilkin Lima, 13-3. Arbi Mezhirov, 14-5. Majay Kuznak, and 12-6. Christoph Klazek. So he's beat guys that win records, real guys. He's on a 6-fight winning streak. And one thing I'll say about him, he's a southpaw, and he's got a beautiful straight left, right down the pipe. It's Conor McGregor-ish, right down the pipe, and he knocks guys out with it. It's a beautiful punch. It's one of those punches that's hard to see coming. If you ever hear Chad Mendes talk about the McGregor fight, or Paulie Malignaggi those guys talk about not being able to see that punch coming. Like Chad Mendes said, McGregor kept hitting him in the stomach, and he couldn't see the punch. He just punch after punch. It's hard to read. So, in Malinology said it took 4 or 5 rounds before he could figure Conor out. And this guy's got that same southpaw, straight lefts, right down the pipe. So you'll in the videos, take a look. You'll see some nice knockouts. But he also has a very efficient and very powerful left high kick where he knocks some guys out. Again, beautiful technique. And, you know, in any sport, it's always cool to see a crafty southpaw, especially a southpaw with some pop. And he fights in an organization called Octagon with a K instead of a C. And it's an organization that they put on shows in Slovakia and Czechoslovakia. But these shows have a big feel to it. It's a newer organization. I believe they put on 15 or 16 events now. And it's kind of got that big show feel to it. It reminds me of the UFC back in like 2003 and 4 when Couture and Liddell and those guys are just starting to get big. But they do good. They draw very well, very live crowd, and good attendance. Some of the folks, bigger names in our organization, I've seen UFC veterans Carlos Famola, Hendrik Da Silva, Victor Pestra, Joaquin Christensen, Bellator veteran Attili Vey. So they do have a mix of old school guys, but they got some tough, gritty guys coming up, and this guy is one of them. And they put on aggressive, exciting fights. But in all the videos today, the highlights of fighters, this would be the one I recommend most in the comments below. Check out his highlights, and you'll be glad you did. Very entertaining. The fifth guy we're going to talk about, and you'll see this whole video is loaded with hyped up, great looking prospects, and this next one is no different. Hardcore guys will know him, but not the casual fan and semi-hardcore fans, I don't believe will. Rafa Garcia, 25 years old, 5'8", 155, Team Punisher Association. Another Mexican fighter, gritty Mexican fighter. 11 wins, no losses, 1 submission. 1 TKO victory, 7 submissions. He's got a key win over UFC veteran Esteban Payan. He put the beat down on Payan, and that video is in the section below. He's beat 12-5 Eric Gonzalez. He's got a victory over World Series of Fighting Bellator veteran Leroux Burley. Again, check out videos. I think I put 3 in the links below. High-paced, exciting fighter. And if you haven't checked out Combat Day America, check it out for some great fights. Talking about Garcia, like I said, high intensity best describes him. Kind of got that smothering offense. Shows a little bit of slammage, a little bit of wrestling. Decent boxing. He's aggressive. That's the best way to describe him. And he's a protege under the great Cub Swanson, so you know he's getting some good training, good exposure. And I would say Combate has a tight grip on him, that organization. I mean, he's Mexican. He is the lightweight champ now, I believe, in that organization. But again, these guys, when you appreciate how much time they put in and how much they're trying to get to the next big show, you really would like to see them get the shot and make some money, regardless of how they do. Get up there, get a shot, get some money made, and you know what? Maybe things will work out for you. But I think now at 11-0, he's got a very tough fight coming up next month, late February. So if he can win that fight, that puts him at 12-0, and you know he's knocking on the door. Another fight or two. Again, let's see this guy get to the Bellator or the UFC and make some money and get a shot at some real exposure. Rafa Garcia, check him out. The next guy we're going to talk about, and I think I can comfortably say this next guy is relatively unknown to most people. He's fighting out of Brazil, Maren Santos. I don't have a height on him, and I don't have an age, but I know he's super young. He did fight at 145, but recently 155, so I included him in this video. You'll see Sherdog has him listed at 125, which is incorrect. 9-0 at Brazil, 5 TKO victories. He does have a nice win over the previously 7-1 Baba Nejambe. And he's also had some amateur Muay Thai fights and I believe some boxing as well. you know, a lot of these young prospects, and for those of you not familiar with the Brazil scene when it comes to MMA, there's a ton of fighters over there, a ton of small organizations, not much money involved. And some of these guys live in poverty, and we never get to see them. They never get out of Brazil. And some guys, you know, end up with 50, 60, 70 professional fights, and we just don't get to see them. And I can tell you that how hard these guys are trying to get exposure and get to the next level and, you know, get a fight in UFC, whatever it takes. And there's so many people there that, you know, we do miss out on some great guys. And eventually, you're going to lose. You can only win so many fights in the neck. Doesn't matter what organization you're in, especially in Brazil. It's a hotbed for fighters. It's tough to keep winning there. So it's great to see some of these young folks get exposure. And when we talk about Santos, I don't have a ton of background information on him or even a lot of footage. But I would recommend checking out the footage I had sent. He's kind of a tricky guy to judge. For his height and his size, he kind of got a real long-looking build, long legs, long arms. And although he's not like a deadly striker, he kind of moves like a younger version of, I guess you could say, the same type of build as Anderson had when he was super young. Or even John Jones when he was super young. Although he's only a shorter fighter, he's nowhere near the height of those guys. But he kind of looks the same way. And he's very athletic. He's light on his feet. And in these fights, you'll see in the video, when he hurts a guy, he puts him away. He's fighting organizations that allow soccer kicks. So he puts some pretty good soccer kicks together, which, you know, I'm not a fan of the soccer kick, but he's good at it. And he really picks his opponents apart. And he reminds me of one of those guys that might not get exposure. So hopefully we can see this guy get a little bit of exposure, maybe through this video and other places. He does have Instagram, so hit him up on there. And another exciting guy, at 9-0 and super young. It's great to see Brazil. We're due for some big, exciting prospects out of Brazil because I know they're there. And he's not the first guy from Brazil in this. He's not the only guy from Brazil in this video, but many more to come. And definitely got to check out Maren Santos. Next on the list. This is a guy I've been following for a long time now. I think he's the oldest guy in this video. I've been a fan of his. He's relatively unknown. That's Denis Kanakov fighting out of Russia. 29 years old, so again, the time is now. 5'10", 155, 12 wins and 1 loss, 7 TKO victories. He trains out of Strela Team Association with the likes of Alexander Volkov and Bellator veteran Mikhail Yatas, among others. He's got some very nice victories. Key wins over UFC veteran Andre Winner, 7-1 Ahmed Holak. He's got a KO win over 11-2 Abdul Babashaki, 4-1 Sambo champ Ferry Tabasov. So he's got some nice victories. He fights again in the ACA, which is, in my opinion, puts on the best fights in Russia. And he's in that killer lightweight division. A division stacked full of killers. So at 12-1, I don't think he's the top guy in that organization. We talked about Razaev before. Kanakov doesn't come across as a heavy wrestling based guy. He's very technical. And he does have power. You'll see some knockouts in the videos. Not like deadly power, but he's very precise with his striking. And very good takedown defense. But he's not a submission guy. So I think he could be a nice fit for the Bellator lightweight division right now. But having said that, I'd like to see him fight in UFC. He's 12-1, he's 29, and maybe one more victory. I'm not sure what kind of contract he's under, but I'd like to see him soon because he's at that point in time in his age where, hey, let's see the guy make some money. He's had a nice run, beat some good guys, beat some ex-UFC fighters, so let's see him get a shot. And let's get him out of that killer division in Russia, the ACA, and make a few bucks. So check him out, please do. I've been a fan of him for a few years now. Denis Kanakov. Next on the list, and I went back and forth on this guy, whether I was going to include him, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But Issac Hardman, 5'11", 155, 24 years old, fighting out of Australia. The association he trains out of is Integrated MMA. 9-0 in MMA with 7 knockouts. I believe he's the AFC lightweight champ and the XFE lightweight champ. The reason I went back and forth about him because I don't know if he's fought MMA in a couple of years, a year or two. It looks like he get into professional boxing where he's 6-0 and with 5 knockouts, as far as I can see from doing some background checks. But I'll tell you, he's got good hands, and he's a big, strong kid, 5'11", 155. The videos I've attached, you have to check out his knockout against Rob Hill. So Rob Hill is a key victory of his. He's 14-11. In that fight against Rob Hill, they go through the first round. You know, pretty good round. Not too exciting, but pretty good round for Hardman. Anyways, the second round comes along, and he catches Hill, I believe, with the right, and he puts Hill out asleep on his feet. It's one of those knockouts. I haven't seen many knockouts like it, and I've watched thousands of fights. Because Hill was out before he hit the ground, but when he went down, it really looked like somebody shot him. The way he was laying there and the way he was knocked out, it was incredible. So just for that video alone, it's worthwhile checking this video so you can see that highlight, which you'll see in the section below. He's also got a key win over Jabalon, which is 23-12. So obviously, striking is his game. And I haven't seen his groundwork. I've seen that he shows some pretty decent takedown defense against the level of competition he's fought. But definitely he's got some pop in his hands. He does throw some decent kicks. And I'm scratching my head now, but I'm sure he's had some kickboxing fights too. I'd have to double back on that. But I don't have really much footage of him grappling, so I can't comment on his ground game. But regardless, another Australian fighter who's 9-0, 24 years old, and he's a knockout. He's a striker. So, I mean, fans love these kind of guys. And hopefully, I mean, if he's going to take the boxing route, and if he's doing good, good for him. But sure as heck, there'll be a spot for him in a big organization, and definitely the UFC, because they're starting to grow in that part of the world. And they could use a guy like him. And at 9-0, let's see him get another fight or two, and then, hey, take your shot while you still can. Next fighter on the list. So typically, before we get into this next guy, typically we won't talk about anybody from ONE FC, especially not a big name. You know, because right now they're on the map as a big organization. So if you're a hardcore fan, you know, you should be familiar with most of their bigger names. However, if we find an obscure guy that's low on the list, or maybe a guy like I'm going to talk about who's highly touted, but not to the mixed martial arts world, I made the decision to talk about him. And that fighter is Gary Tonon. 28, 5'8", 155, Team Renzo Gracie and Evolve MMA, fighting out of America. 5-0, 2 TKO victories and 3 submission victories. He got a key win over Yoshihiki Nakahara, who's 13-5. Let's talk about his grappling victories. He has got submission victories. Are you ready for this? He's got a submission victory over Gilbert Burns, Shinya Aoki, Vinny Magalhaes, Dylan Dennis, and Marcin Held, to name others. So, that wasn't a mistake. I read those properly. There are some pretty impressive submission victories. I put a couple of decent fights in there for him, and I gotta say, if you don't know much about Gary, do yourself a favor and Google him. He's got a pretty good write-up on Wikipedia, but obviously jiu-jitsu all day is his background. He showed surprisingly good striking for a guy with his background. He's pretty loose on his feet, looks pretty athletic, and showed some pretty decent ground and pound, you know, especially with those couple of stoppage victories. I believe he's a 5-time Eddie Bravo and Invitational champ. It got titles about the IBJF World and Pan American Championships, a black belt under Jiu-Jitsu black belt under Almeida, Ricardo Almeida and Tom DeBlas. So check him out. Just go to his Wikipedia if you haven't heard about him before. But he's a big deal if you're a jiu-jitsu guy that he's going into mixed martial arts. And I've watched Gary in the past, and I didn't even know he was fighting until recently. So again, typically don't mention guys in ONE FC, but I know a lot of fans that are like, you can be a hardcore fan, but you're hardcore to UFC, and you wouldn't know about Gary. So hopefully this gets a little bit of exposure for Gary. Great competitor and very high level jiu-jitsu. He's a threat to anybody on the ground. I don't care what organization you're in or what weight class you're in. He's a threat to anybody on the ground. The next guy we're going to talk about, and this guy, I believe you're going to have to be super hardcore to know him. He's probably one of the most unknown guys on the list today. Kirill Gorobets, 25 years old. I got him at 5'10", fighting in the Ukraine. Tehran House, 9-1, 5 TKO victories, 3 submission victories, and hasn't fought a lot of big name competition. But I will say, check out his videos. This guy is very comfortable on his feet, and he's got great striking, punching, and kicking, and he's very athletic. I put a video of a brutal head kick KO. You'll see that below. He has also got a banana split decision, or sorry, a banana split submission victory. I said it right, banana split submission victory. Do yourself a favor and check that out. I'm scratching my head the last time I seen it. But that video is there. The head kick video is there. There's a couple other nice knockout videos below. He's also shows some pretty unique movement on the ground when he's trying to get that top position. You'll see some athletic spins in midair to get the advantage on the ground. He's very fast, and 7 straight wins since his last 5 years ago. I also seen some nice judo throws in some of his fights. It's pretty interesting. It's a guy that I don't think anybody knows about, you know, from mainstream. So these are the kind of guys that videos like this really help out. It kind of puts his name out there. And I sure like to see this guy get more exposed and fight in a bigger show, because he looks great, very athletic and exciting to watch. And you know what? There's not a lot of fighters from the Ukraine off the top of my head and the UFC. There's a few there, but we could certainly use more. So check him out. The next guy we're going to talk about, Anthony Romero, 22 years old, 5'11", 155, Canadian fighter, Parabellum MMA and Modern Vision MMA. Key wins over Troy Whitman, who's 6-3. I got Anthony at 6-0 with 1 submission victory and 1 TKO victory. And he also had a very successful amateur career. You will see a couple of videos below in the comments section. And I did a little bit of research on Anthony, the most I could in a short amount of time. And I believe he started Taekwondo at 5 and became a black belt at 10 or 11, something along those lines. He won a gold medal at the Ontario World Games, and he also had a 3-time Ontario Provincial Jiu-Jitsu champ. And I believe he's a black belt in that at 19 to go along with a judo club. There's Taekwondo, sorry. So, again, I think Anthony's still growing, and I believe he had a shot at the Contender Series. But I think he had a contract with King in the Cage that kind of put a bit of a roadblock there for him. So I know he's been looked at before. That contract held him up from going to the Contender Series. I believe so. I don't have facts on that, but it's what I've been told. And I can tell you he's pretty technical. And he's one of those guys, again, there's so many fighters today, and some things a fan takes credit for is that how serious some of these guys are. And you may not hear about them out because some of them don't make it. But I can tell you, the guys in this video, and Anthony included, he's very serious about making it to the next step. He's very hungry. And I believe this is his full focus now. He's only a young guy. I'm not sure about schooling and that kind of stuff, but I can tell you he's fully committed, and he wants to make the next step, and he wants to get in the UFC. And at 6-0, he's off to a great start. Again, he's very technical and looks very patient when he fights. And it doesn't really stand out to me that he's got one electrifying talent. He's more of a well-rounded guy. But again, very serious about his craft. And he's the kind of guy that I believe, I see him getting to the UFC. You know, I'm a Canadian, and it's always great to see Canadian fighters. In the last number of years, MMA was blowing up, you know, around 2010 or so. And it certainly has dipped off, but there is still a lot of talented fighters here. We just don't have as many shows. And Anthony is one of these guys that I believe can make it to that next level. I'm not sure, you know, I'm not saying he can walk in the UFC and win a bunch of fights, but I think he can grow enough. He's young enough. He's got the background, and he's hungry. So with a couple of victories, yeah, I think he's there, and I think he gets a shot. So definitely got to watch out for Anthony Romero. Next on the list, Lucas Almeida, 28 years old, fighting out of Brazil, 5'11", 11 wins, no losses. 7 TKOs with 4 submissions, so he finishes fights. Key wins, he's beaten 8-3-1 Nico Cucino, Bruno Tavares, who's 12-5, Guilherme Miranda, which is 18-9, Diego Barbosa, 8-3, and Diego Silva, 7-4. He's also had some professional kickboxing experience too. And I've attached some videos of him. He's a pretty decent looking fighter. And I haven't seen much of his ground game, but he has 4 submission victories, so he can finish fights obviously via submission. Obviously, though, the bread and butter to me looks like his striking. And again, it's always great to see fighters coming out of Brazil. Lucas right now at 28 years of age. With his record, I think it's the guy that you want to see get a shot soon. And again, he's a guy that can end fights at one punch. So maybe one more victory, and hopefully he can get some exposure and get a shot in Bellator or the UFC. Preferably the UFC, in my opinion. But check him out, Lucas Almeida. Moving on, let's talk about an American fighter. I believe this is the first American fighter in the video. Max Rohskopf, fighting out of the USA, 25 years of age. I have met 6'1". I don't know if he's 6'1 or not. He doesn't look like he's 6'1", but that's what he's listed at. 155, Extreme Couture and Sahara MMA, 4-0 with 4 submission victories. A couple of key wins. He beaten 5-1 Omar Hussein and 14-9 Zach Zane. Also, he has his own website, so check his website out, maxrohskopf.com. I can tell you he's a Division I wrestler. Also had an extensive high school wrestling career, and he trained jiu-jitsu under just a tremendous jiu-jitsu player, Robert Drysdale. So that tells you the level of coaching he's getting. And anytime you get a prospect with a decent wrestling background out of America, pay attention, because, you know, just from a guy that's been watching the sport religiously since, you know, the early 90s, predominantly wrestling is, if you're going to pick one base to have, it seems like wrestling. You talk about a lot of those ex-champions and fighters that dominate the sport. A lot of those guys started out as wrestlers. Daniel Cormier, you know, John Jones, Phil Davis, Ben Askren. All these guys started out as wrestlers at one point. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's the best background to have, but it certainly is a great base to start with. So it's always exciting to see new blue chip fighters, ex-wrestlers coming out and putting their hand in MMA, so check them out. Next on the list, I at first had this next fighter down as Canadian, but I decided to change it to his first country, Paraguay, where he was born and grew up. Alex Martinez, fights at a champion gym, 5'10", 155, 25 years old, 6 wins, no losses, no ties, 1 no contest, 2 TKO victories and 3 submission victories. He's beaten some good guys. Anders Moreira, 7-2. Clay Divin, 5-1. Davis and Johnson, 4-1. So he got some nice victories. He moved to Canada at a young age, 9 or 10 years old. And I believe his father actually ran his own martial arts school back in Paraguay when he was young. And I believe he's had an extensive amateur career. And the record I could find him at was 17-4. He competed in the IMMAF World Championships, and I think he lost both of those in the multiple World Championships, 15 and 16, and I believe he lost both events, the gold medal fights in both years. So, you know, and he trains under, or has trained under, Vilma Hood. Another fighter that, to me, when you listen to this guy talk, this is what he wants to do. He's making a run. He's not just in this as a side thing or a hobby, or he's somebody that works and fights. It sounds to me like this guy's a fighter, and he wants to make it to the next step. And it's another example, even though he's originally from Paraguay, it's another Canadian that we can see make it to the next level. And I think him and Romero can really help the sport in Canada by making the UFC, by making Bellator, and shaking things up a bit. And, you know, this guy's a decent fighter. He finishes fights, and he's very serious about his craft. So hopefully he gets a shot. Next on the list, we're moving over to Wales for this one. Mason Jones, 24-0, 5'9", 155, 8-0, 2 TKO victories, 3 submissions under Pedro Bessa BJJ. Victories over 13-6, Atlas Kiwi, 14-5, Danaman Desme, and 9-3, Capper Formula. Some pretty cool videos of Mason. I couldn't find a ton, but I can tell you he's young. He's got decent kickboxing and boxing. Wrestling looks okay. Again, I haven't really seen him exposed to any real tough fighters yet, but the fights he puts on are exciting. Fights in Cage Warriors, and we know Cage Warriors puts on great fights. They have some decent fighters in their organization as well. And I believe it's, Cage Warriors is probably known as a bigger promotion in that part of the world, so they do get lots of exposure. I'm not sure, they may have even been on Fight Pass. So at 8-0 at his age, I believe he's pretty close. Maybe 2 victories, and we see this guy get a shot. There's no doubt in my mind. Check him out, Mason Jones. Next on the list, probably more obscure to a lot of folks, Zhorobek Teshebaev, fighting out of Kyrgyzstan. 6 feet tall, 155, 28 years old, 7-0, 2 TKO, 5 submissions. He's got a big win over Musa Kamiev, who beat UFC veteran Efren Escudero, and Bellator contender Daniel Weisho, to name a few. So he's a good fighter. He's tall. He moves good for lightweight. I don't know a lot about him, but in that victory he had over Kasimov in ACA, he showed very good toughness, and he showed that nice killer instinct to finish the fight. So, I mean, you don't see many, I haven't seen many fighters make it to the big show in Kyrgyzstan. So I think it's great when we see these kind of guys come up and show their talent. And to get some of these guys to the bigger promotion is great for that part of the world. It's good for the sport. The more countries that we enter with our bigger organizations, again, it's only helping the sport as a whole. So hopefully we see this guy get a shot. He's in that tough division in ACA again. So like I said before, this is the 3rd guy from that division I've talked about. If you hang around the barbershop too long, you're going to get a haircut. So I like to see this guy move over to maybe another victory or two, and maybe a Bellator start would be great for him. But check him out. The next fighter, we're going to stick with Kyrgyzstan. It's another guy that I happen to come across. 25 years of age, Ruslan Embolic Ulu. 5'10", don't have an exact weight, but I know he fights at lightweight. Again, Kyrgyzstan fighter, 12 wins, no losses, 5 KO victories, 4 submissions. Let's talk about some of his opponents. 9-5, Lambert Azigdov, Magomed Ibragimov at 6-2, and Hobo Tixier Bieke 9-9. Very hard to pronounce those names, but doing my best. Some video highlights of his fights. One of his fights was in ACA, again, killer division in the organization, but he shows pretty good talent. It looks like, the bread and butter of his game is ground fighting, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, that kind of stuff. Good takedown defense. Uses the low leg kick pretty effectively from what I could see, but he looks pretty comfortable in the ring, in the cage, sorry. He looks pretty comfortable moving around. Good ground and pound. And definitely got some talent. And at 25 years of age, hey, there's lots of room to grow as well. But that's a real nice record at 12-0, and with some decent guys he's beaten. Next on the list, going back to Brazil, Brenner Barreto. I have a couple of different age groups for him. One states 24, one states 29. I believe he is 24. He's listed at 6 feet, but I believe he's 5'10". Another lightweight, 155 out of Brazil. Fighting Society, Banal team, 8-0, 6 submissions. 6 TKO victories, 2 submissions, so he finishes fights. Key wins over 11-6, Nathan Batista. He hasn't fought a lot of high-level competition, but he reminds you of that good, gritty, rough Brazilian type of fighter that grinds you out, uses the ground game, very aggressive with his ground control and ground and pound. He's got some decent submission victories. And he shows KO power. I believe one of the videos is a nice knee knockout victory over Luis El Dragon. I believe that's a knee knockout. Just looking at some of the notes here. I don't have a ton of footage on this guy, but he's a big lightweight, and he just seems to be another guy that's a real fighter with some good talent and some good room for growth. So hopefully somebody sees this guy and he gets a shot. It's great to see all these young prospects from Brazil, and he's no different. Good to see him. Next on the list, sticking with Brazil. I went back and forth on this guy about whether I was going to include him in the video or not, and I decided to. Jackson Loureiro, 25, 6-0, and 55. Another Brazilian fighter. Chute Boxe and Benelo Cabrillo. 10 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw, 6 TKO victories, 1 submission. He's got some nice wins. That's one of the reasons I put him in there. Key wins over Anderson Ferreira was 14-2. 15-6 fighter. Stefan Zuica, the 9-2. And Nemanja Kovac at 11-3. So you can see he's beaten some real guys with some real records. He shows up to fight. He looks pretty comfortable from the bottom. He's an aggressive fighter. Primarily seems to use his striking to win fights. A little stiff. When you see this guy fight, he's a little stiff. He's one of those guys that he punches heavy, but he is stiff on his feet. But he's got room for growth. And the biggest thing I see is toughness, the will to win. And he's a hard worker. So there's room for growth. But again, I think the guy got potential to get a fight in Bellator and maybe even UFC someday. So check him out. Again, a little rough around the edges, but good ground and pound, good submission defense, good power, and he's been in a lot of tough wars. He's kind of like the second fighter we talked about in the video from Mexico, Golden Boy. If you watch his ex-fights, there's no easy fights. The guys he's fighting they're not names you've heard of, but they're greedy guys as well. So that's one thing about the regional scene is some guys have a pile of wars before they get to the big show. The last fighter we're going to talk about, number 20, and if you stuck it out so far, I appreciate it. Nariman Abbasov, 25 years old, 5'8", 155, 24-3, 9 TKOs, 4 submissions. Azerbaijan is the country. He started his career at 3-2, and since then he's won 21-1 over his last 22 fights. Key victories: he's got a very nice victory over the 26-2 Kumat Kamatov, 7-2 Umar Taragov, 17-7 Adil Bhargav. He's beat 11-2 Yakunov, 49-16 Alexander Butenko, and Alexander Yakunov 10-3. So right down in there, you can see he's beat some great fighters. I put 3 or 4 videos in the section below. Check them out. When I first watched his first couple of fights, he just reminded me of a real smothering wrestler. But then the last 6 or 7 fights, mostly stand-up. And, you know, he had one questionable decision victory, but he's a great fighter. And we don't have too many fighters from his country in bigger organizations. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody. I'm sure there is. But let's see him get a shot. I believe he's the Fight Night Global lightweight champ. I believe so. And, hey, the record speaks for itself. He's pushing 30 fights. He's only lost a few, and he's on a terrific tear of 21-1. And pretty good fighter. Tries to fight at a high pace. And looks like he's well-rounded, so I'd like to see him get a shot just to get some, not only for himself, but to get some exposure from that part of the world. So, if you stuck with us so far, that's 20 fighters from the lightweight division. And that ends the first video in this 9-part series. Again, I haven't decided which division I'm going to do next, but I'm hoping to pump it out in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Again, thanks so much for watching. I will ask, if you liked the video, please hit the like button. Please comment. Please share the video. Also, I've lost touch with a lot of YouTube fans in the MMA community the last number of years because I've been away so long. So please, the more you share, the more it's going to help the video out and the fighters. And let me know your thoughts, because I will read all the comments and respond. And like I said, I'm motivated. I'm really excited to put out the 9 videos for all the weight classes, and I believe the industry is stacked full of prospects. I mean, it's very exciting. These 20 guys today talked about. There's another 50 guys I could have mentioned, but these are the 20 I picked. And again, there's some great fighters that I haven't mentioned. if I mention a fighter in a previous video, you won't see many of these new videos. So again, thank you all for watching. And hopefully you'll see you again on video number 2, which should be out in a few weeks. And I really look forward to hearing from all you folks. So thank you very much and enjoy.